When a titan of industry dies alone in his fortress of wealth, the world reads it as a tragedy. But what if it wasn't? What if the man who controlled every aspect of his multi-billion-dollar empire was murdered by the very people he controlled? The local police called it heart failure, a simple, tragic accident. But the dead man left one final message, a video, and he claims his killer is watching. In a family poisoned by secrets, who is the traitor? Could it be the ice-cold daughter he refused to respect? The reckless son buried in gambling debts? Or the quiet nephew, the outsider who lived in the shadows watching them all? The truth is darker than you can imagine. Harrison Ridge, the sprawling ancestral home of the Harrison dynasty, never knew a silence so heavy. It was not the silence of peace, but of suppressed resentment. The fog of the Virginia foothills clung to the manicured lawns like a shroud, muffling the distant nervous stamps of thoroughbred horses in the stables. It was just past 6:15 a.m. when Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper for 3 decades, made her way to the master wing. She carried the silver tray as she always did, with the black coffee and the single-folded newspaper. She paused at the massive oak doors. She knocked. Once. Twice. There was no reply. She entered the room, her shoes sinking into the thick carpet. "Mr. Harrison," she called softly. In the master's suite, under the pale, unforgiving light of the morning, lay Arthur Harrison. The room smelled of old leather, expensive bourbon, and the cold stillness of death. His body, found by the housekeeper, rested as if he were asleep, his 60-year-old face turned toward the window, overlooking the empire he had built. But his eyes were open, frozen in a final, quiet look of surprise. The local coroner, a man who had known the Harrison family for 20 years, arrived before the sun was high. He checked the vital signs he knew he would not find. He looked at the untouched glass of water on the nightstand. He looked at Arthur's stressed, Type A personality. He sighed, signing the preliminary report with a heavy pen. "It's a massive coronary event," he declared to the 3 figures standing in the hallway. "Natural causes. A tragedy." No one in the family dared to disagree aloud. But beneath the surface, each of the heirs felt the cold, sharp relief of freedom, freshly won. The wake was a perfect performance of high society grief, staged in the grand hall of Harrison Ridge. Eleanor, the 40-year-old daughter and the true manager of the estate, stood rigid, accepting condolences with a dry-eyed, terrifying control. Julian, the 30-year-old son, the prodigal, was restless, his eyes constantly checking his phone, his grief looking more like agitation. And then there was Miles, the 25-year-old nephew, the outsider, who stood near the back observing, his face a perfect mask of neutral sorrow. They exchanged calculated hugs. They accepted the sympathies of senators and business rivals. They shed the appropriate sterile tears. The performance ended when the family lawyer, Mr. Davies, cleared his throat in the adjoining library. He was a small man, dwarfed by the towering shelves of books. He did not carry flowers. He carried a locked leather briefcase and a tablet. "My duty is to execute the final wishes of Arthur," Davies said, his voice tense. He had been Arthur Harrison's lawyer and his punching bag for 40 years. He was visibly nervous. He gave me very specific instructions. A final testament. On video, the family gathered. The air crackled. This was the moment. The reading of the will, the distribution of the bourbon distillery, the horse stables, the stocks, the land. Davies placed the tablet on the mahogany desk. He pressed play. Arthur Harrison's image flickered to life. He was not in his study. He was in a small, dusty attic room, a place none of them recognized. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. His hand, holding the camera, was visibly shaking. He stared into the lens, his gaze piercing through the screen, looking at his daughter, his son, and his nephew. He spoke, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, full of a terrifying, cold rage. "If you are watching this," he began, "it is not because my heart finally gave out. It is because I was murdered." The blood froze in the room. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. Julian stopped breathing. Arthur leaned closer to the camera, his face filling the screen. "I was poisoned, slowly, and the killer, The traitor is in this room. To understand the weight of that accusation, you had to understand Arthur Harrison. He was not merely a wealthy man, he was a monument, a self-made king ruling from a throne he had built with his own hands, brick by brick, deal by bloody deal. The Harrison Empire was not just a business, it was the entire ecosystem of their lives, and Arthur was the god who controlled the weather. The crown jewel was the Harrison Ridge Distillery. It was not some sterile, modern factory. It was a heritage brand, selling a myth of old Virginia to the entire world. The bourbon was aged in charred oak barrels, carrying the scent of smoke, history, and an obscene amount of profit. Arthur had inherited a small, failing distillery from his father 40 years ago and, through sheer ruthless ambition, had transformed it into a global icon. He owned the cornfields that supplied the mash, the bottling plants, the distribution trucks, and the politicians who kept his taxes low. But the distillery was just the engine. The thoroughbred stables were his passion, a sprawling, money-losing vanity project that produced champions. These horses were his true children, beautiful, powerful, obedient, and entirely dependent on him for their prestige. He owned vast tracts of land, historic properties in Richmond, and sleek, cold glass offices in Washington, D.C. Arthur Harrison was worth billions, but the money, as everyone in the family knew, was secondary. The real pleasure, the true currency he dealt in, was total, absolute control. He used his fortune not as a tool for comfort, but as a weapon of obedience. He was a master manipulator, a puppet master who delighted in seeing the strings. He held their trust funds, their inheritances, and their very identities hostage. Every major life decision required his signature. When Eleanor wanted to get her MBA at Wharton, Arthur agreed, but only on the condition that she returned to Harrison Ridge to work for him, not with him, for a salary he deemed appropriate. When Julian wanted to marry a socialite Arthur despised, Arthur didn't forbid it. He simply called the young woman's father and arranged for a merger that financially ruined her family, proving that his reach was inescapable. The wedding, needless to say, never happened. The rule of the house, the mantra he repeated at every tense family dinner, was simple: loyalty above all. But loyalty, in Arthur's dictionary, meant total submission. It meant agreeing with his politics. It meant laughing at his jokes. It meant never, ever outshining him. He was a tyrant of the dinner table. He would famously, agonizingly stop a meal mid-bite to correct someone. "Julian," he'd say, his voice a cold drawl, "that is the fish fork, not the salad fork. Do you intend to embarrass me, or are you simply incompetent?" He would do this in front of guests, in front of staff, relishing the flush of shame on his son's face. His most effective tactic was to divide and conquer. He cultivated the rivalry between his heirs, ensuring they were too busy fighting for his approval to ever unite against him. He would praise Julian's natural charm in front of Eleanor, deliberately undermining her years of hard work. "You see, Eleanor," he'd say, "people like Julian. He opens doors with a smile. You just kick them down with a balance sheet. It's aggressive." He knew Julian was reckless, but he used that recklessness as a tool to keep Eleanor insecure. And then there was Miles, the nephew, the quiet one. Arthur had taken him in after his sister's tragic death, a fact he never let Miles forget. He was charity. Arthur gave Miles a high-paying, utterly meaningless job in the distillery's heritage department, essentially paying him to be a ghost. This infuriated Eleanor, who had to fight for every dollar, and it enraged Julian, who saw Miles getting a free ride without any of the pressure. Arthur had created a perfect triangle of resentment. They were not a family. They were a collection of individual prisoners, trapped in a golden cage, each serving a life sentence. Arthur Harrison did not build a home. He had built a fortress and populated it with hostages. The hatred they felt for him was not a secret, at least not from each other. It was the unspoken truth in every room they shared. It was the subtext of every forced holiday meal, every polite, "Yes, Father." It was the only true inheritance he had ever given them, a deep, unifying, and suffocating hatred. And now, one of them, fueled by that very hatred, had finally cut the strings. As Arthur's face vanished from the tablet, the library was plunged back into a suffocating, heavy silence. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, looked physically ill. Julian was pale, his mouth slightly open, a picture of pure, unfiltered shock. But Eleanor, the first to be placed under the microscope of suspicion, did not flinch. She was 40 years old, with her dark brown hair pulled back into a bun so severe it seemed to pull at her very skin. Her eyes, a cold, clear green, were the only part of her that showed any life, and right now they were not filled with grief or fear. They were filled with a sharp, calculating fury. She wore a perfectly tailored black blazer and trousers that looked more like armor than clothing. Eleanor was, by every definition, the true heir to the Harrison Empire. While Julian played the part of the prodigal son, Eleanor was the business. She had earned her MBA from Wharton, returning not out of loyalty, but out of a fierce, possessive ambition. She saw Harrison Ridge not as a home, but as a corporation, a legacy to be protected, and more importantly, to be grown. For 15 years, she had been the de facto CEO. It was Eleanor who had navigated the complex international distribution laws that put Harrison Bourbon in exclusive clubs in Shanghai and Dubai. It was Eleanor who had modernized the aging distillery, increasing output by 40% without sacrificing the heritage brand Arthur was so obsessed with. She was the one who woke up at 5 a.m., who analyzed the soil reports, who negotiated with the unions, and who knew the name of every thoroughbred and every employee. And Arthur took the credit. Her relationship with her father was a long, cold war, punctuated by his casual psychological sadism. He never respected her. He used her. In public, he would refer to her as my brilliant girl, but in private, and more cruelly in board meetings, he would diminish her. When she presented a new global strategy, he would interrupt, "That's a fine idea, Ellie. Now let the men talk about the real numbers." He would override her decisions just to prove he could, costing the company millions, just to remind her who was king. Her ice heiress persona wasn't a choice. It was a shield she had forged, piece by piece after every humiliation. She had learned, the hard way, that emotion was a liability Arthur would exploit. So she became a creature of pure logic, ambition, and control. Her motive for the crime was not simple greed. It was the righteous fury of a creator watching her life's work being set on fire. Just 2 weeks ago, Eleanor discovered, not from her father, but from a leaked email, the ultimate betrayal. Arthur was in the final stages of a secret negotiation to sell the entire Harrison Ridge estate, the distillery, the brand, everything, and he was selling it to Global Spirits United. This was not just a rival. This was a soulless conglomerate known for buying heritage brands, gutting them for their brand recognition, and then firing the entire local workforce to move operations offshore. Arthur wasn't just selling her legacy, he was selling her home, her life's work, and the future of the entire town that depended on them. She had confronted him in his study. The argument, overheard by Mrs. Gable, was not loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. It was the sound of ice cracking. Eleanor had demanded to know why. Arthur, swirling a bourbon, had simply smiled that cold, thin smile. "Because I can, Eleanor," he said. "It's my name on the building. It was always mine. You are just an employee." That single sentence, "You are just an employee," was the execution of her soul. Now the police investigation, prompted by the video, was looking into her, and they found something. In the week before Arthur's death, Eleanor, using a series of blind trusts and complex offshore accounts, had liquidated a massive portfolio of her own personal stocks. She had moved $50 million. $50 million. Was it a golden parachute? An escape fund for when the company was sold out from under her? Or was it something more sinister? Was she planning a hostile takeover? A desperate move to buy out the deal? Or, as the lead detective now wondered, was that $50 million transfer a down payment for an assassin? Eleanor Harrison, the woman of ice, who prioritized control above all else, had just seen her entire world on the verge of being annihilated by the one man she could never defeat. She had the motive, she had the intelligence, and she, more than anyone, had the cold, methodical discipline to plan a murder, watch her father die, and then organize his wake without shedding a single tear. If Eleanor was the ice, Julian was the fire. He was 30 years old and he was the face of the Harrison brand. He had Arthur's charm, his grandfather's dark, perpetually messy hair, and a smile that could disarm a hostile board meeting. He was the one Arthur sent to the Kentucky Derby, dressed in seersucker, a mint julep in hand. He was the one who gave the distillery tours to VIP clients, his voice dripping with Southern charm and rehearsed anecdotes about the good old days. While Eleanor worked the balance sheets, Julian worked the room. He was the gilded stallion, the public face of Harrison Ridge, the son who was supposed to inherit the throne. But it was all an act, a desperate, hollow performance. Arthur, in his sadistic way, loved Julian's charm but despised his weakness. He saw his son not as an heir but as a failed investment. He had given Julian every advantage, every elite school, every connection, and Julian had squandered it all on fast cars, faster women, and the slowest horses. Julian's public life was a whirlwind of socialite parties and charity auctions. His private life was a cold sweat of pure panic. He was drowning. He was affogata in gambling debts. This wasn't a few $1,000s on a bad poker hand. This was millions. Julian had a disease, a compulsion to chase the thrill that his father's controlled, suffocating world denied him. He started with private, high-stakes poker games in New York. When he was banned from those, he moved to offshore sports betting. When those accounts were frozen, he made his final fatal mistake. He borrowed money from the wrong people. A private lending group based out of Miami, men who did not care about his family name and who did not send polite reminder emails. They sent large, quiet men who would sit in the back of his car and remind him of the interest rate. Julian was terrified. He needed money, and he needed it fast. So he committed the one sin Arthur Harrison considered unforgivable. He stole from the family. He used the thoroughbred stables, his father's passion project, as his personal piggy bank. It was pathetically simple. He would report that a prized foal had died of a sudden illness, while in reality, he had sold it for cash at a minor auction under a different name. He created fake invoices from veterinary clinics. He charged exorbitant stud fees from fictitious clients and pocketed the money. Over 18 months, Julian siphoned nearly $2 million from the Harrison empire, a desperate, frantic attempt to keep his head above water. He thought he was being clever. He thought his father, so focused on bourbon and Eleanor's spreadsheets, would never notice the petty cash of the stables. He was wrong. Arthur, the ultimate control freak, always found out. The discovery had happened 1 week ago. It wasn't an accountant who found it. It was one of Arthur's oldest friends, a rival breeder from Kentucky, who called. "Arthur," the man had said, "I'm looking at a magnificent 2-year-old colt. The seller is odd, but the bloodline—" "Arthur, that's your bloodline. I thought you said you weren't selling." The facade crumbled. Arthur had not confronted Julian in the library. He had confronted him in the stables, the scene of the crime. A stable hand, a young man named Connor, had overheard the entire thing, and he had already given his statement to the police. It was late at night. The air was thick with the smell of sweet hay and leather. Arthur was not yelling. His voice, Connor said, was terrifyingly calm. "You are not just a gambler, Julian," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the vast, quiet stable. "You are a thief. You stole from me. You sold my bloodline." Julian had tried to deny it, to charm his way out, to blame the stablemaster. But Arthur held up the falsified sales receipts. "You are finished," Arthur said. Julian begged. He cried. He offered to go to rehab. And then Arthur delivered the final, executing blow. "The Harrison Legacy Cup is next week," Arthur stated. This was their biggest event of the year. 300 of their most important clients, breeders, and distributors would be there. "I am going to get on that podium. Before the main auction, I am going to tell them all that you are a fraud, that you are disowned. I will destroy your name so completely you won't be able to get a credit card. You will be ruined." This was not a threat. It was a promise. For Arthur, the theft wasn't about the $2 million. It was about the betrayal. And that is when, according to the stable hand, Julian snapped. The charm vanished, replaced by the cornered rage of a desperate animal. He grabbed his father by the coat, shoving him against the stall of a startled horse. "You will not do that," Julian whispered, his voice shaking with a rage that terrified the stable hand. "You will not destroy me. I swear to God, you will pay for this. I will bury you before you set foot on that podium." That was 3 days ago. Now, Arthur was dead. The Legacy Cup was canceled, and Julian's problem, his debts, his public execution had vanished. He had the motive, he had the violent temper, and he had a ticking clock that ran out just in time. And then, there was Miles. In the electrified atmosphere of the library, as Eleanor's rage and Julian's panic vibrated in the air, Miles was a vacuum. He was 25 years old, but his quiet, watchful presence made him seem ageless. He was thin, with the same dark Harrison hair, but his eyes were not Arthur's cold blue or Eleanor's sharp green. They were a deep, unreadable brown, and they missed nothing. Miles was the shadow of the family. He was the son of Arthur's younger sister. a woman who had disgraced the family by running off with a musician. When she died in a tragic car accident, Arthur, in a rare and calculated act of public generosity, took the orphaned 10-year-old boy in. Arthur never let him forget it. Miles was the charity case. He grew up alongside Eleanor and Julian, but never with them. He wore their expensive hand-me-downs. He ate at the same massive table, but always at the far end. Like a high-status servant, he was the permanent house guest, the living reminder of his mother's failure. While Eleanor was groomed for power and Julian was groomed for public relations, Miles was given a humiliating non-job. He was the family historian. His office was a small cold room in the oldest wing of the mansion, filled with rotting leather-bound books and tin-type photos of dead Harrisons. His job was to curate the myth, to document the greatness of the man who treated him with daily casual contempt. He was literally paid to live in the past, a ghost cataloging the achievements of his jailer. This chronic humiliation forged a unique kind of hatred. It was not the explosive rage of Julian or the icy ambition of Eleanor. It was a slow-acting poison. It was the patient, deep and methodical hatred of the invisible man. And from the shadows, he watched. He saw everything. He was the one who saw the courier deliver the secret sale documents to Arthur, and he watched Eleanor's face when she found out. He was the one in the hayloft who overheard Julian's desperate, tearful fight with his father in the stables. Miles knew all their secrets, but he had a secret of his own, a dangerous, motivating secret. He was in love. He was obsessively, silently, and hopelessly in love with his cousin Eleanor. He didn't just admire her, he worshipped her. He saw her as the true Harrison, the only one with the strength to match Arthur. He saw her coldness not as a flaw, but as a suit of armor she wore to survive. In his mind, they were the same, both trapped, both smarter than the patriarch. He dreamed of a day when Arthur was gone and he could be her advisor, her confidant, her equal. This obsession led him to his fatal mistake. 3 weeks ago, Julian brought home his new fiancée, a sharp, ambitious woman from a rival Bourbon family named Isabella. Isabella, seeing the dysfunction of Harrison Ridge, was playing her own game. She saw Julian's weakness, but she also saw Miles's invisibility. She cornered him in the library late one night. She flirted. She sympathized. She saw him in a way no one else ever had. "You're the smart one, aren't you, Miles?" she had whispered. "You and Eleanor, you two run this place. Julian is just a mascot." Miles, starving for validation and desperately lonely, fell into the trap. It was a brief, sordid, and utterly disastrous affair, and Arthur, of course, found out. He had a private investigator on Isabella, not trusting her motives. The PI returned with photographs of Miles and Isabella meeting secretly at a motel in a neighboring town. Arthur didn't care about the infidelity. He cared about the complication. This affair could jeopardize the political alliance he was trying to build with Isabella's family. Miles, the charity case, had made a mess. The confrontation was brutal. It happened in Arthur's study, the same room where he had crushed Julian. Arthur didn't yell. He was worse. He was disgusted. "You are a parasite, Miles," Arthur hissed, throwing the photographs on the desk. "I gave you a name. I gave you a home. And you repay me by acting like a common animal, complicating my business." Miles, for the first time in his life, tried to fight back. He mentioned Julian's debts, Eleanor's anger. Arthur laughed. "Their sins are the sins of royalty, you little fool. Yours are the sins of the gutter. You are nothing." Arthur then delivered his final judgment. "You will be gone by morning. I am not just kicking you out. I am erasing you. Your job is terminated. Your trust fund, which I control, is dissolved. I will make one phone call, and your name will be mud in this state. You will not be able to get a job as a historian. You will not be able to get a job as a waiter. You will go back to the same poverty your pathetic mother died in. You are finished." For Miles, this was not just the threat of being disinherited. It was the threat of total annihilation. He would lose his home. He would lose his proximity to Eleanor. He would be cast out, a non-person, erased. He had spent his entire life in the shadows, his hatred simmering. Arthur had just turned that simmer to a rolling boil. Miles knew the house better than anyone. He knew the old forgotten passages. He knew the schedules of the staff. He knew where Arthur kept his special bourbon, the one he drank every night. And as the family historian, he had spent years reading about the old remedies and poisons his ancestors used to use. He was the invisible man, the perfect person to commit a murder, and watch, silently, as the other heirs tore each other apart. The image of Arthur Harrison's face, frozen in a look of cold triumph, hung in the air for a single agonizing second before the tablet screen went black. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a physical thing, a crushing weight that pressed down on the three people left in the library. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, was trembling, his hand hovering over the tablet as if it were a bomb. Eleanor stood like a statue carved from ice, her green eyes fixed on the blank screen, her entire body rigid. Julian, by contrast, had collapsed into one of his father's leather armchairs, his breathing ragged, his face the color of ash. Miles, the shadow, simply stood by the bookshelf, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He had not moved an inch. Mr. Davies finally cleared his throat, the small sound echoing like a gunshot in the vast room. I have to. Play it again, Eleanor commanded, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. Miss Harrison, I don't think. Play it again. Mr. Davies fumbled, his shaking fingers restarting the video. Arthur's face returned, his eyes seeming to bore into each of them. He was still in that dusty attic room. He looked tired, but his voice was energized by pure, distilled malice. So, the voice from the grave continued, you know you are in a room with a murderer, my murderer. But it's worse than that. He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. My killer was sloppy. They did not just want me dead. They were in a panic. They wanted to erase something. He leaned in, his voice dropping. My private safe, the one behind the painting in my study. It was opened. The killer thought they were clever. They used the old combination, the one I haven't used in 20 years. But they were desperate. What was in it? Arthur smiled, a horrible, mocking expression. Not money, not jewels. Something far more valuable. They stole the original Harrison Ridge Charter, the 1,870 land grant signed by the governor. Julian looked confused, muttering, a piece of paper? Who cares? You should, you idiot, Eleanor hissed, her eyes never leaving the screen. Arthur's video continued as if he had heard his son. You see, that document was our foundation, and it contained a covenant, a poison pill, as you modern people would call it. My great-grandfather was a very cautious man. He put a clause in that charter, a moral bankruptcy clause. A flicker of pure terror crossed Julian's face. Arthur's smile widened. It states that if the Harrison bloodline is ever proven to be morally bankrupt, or if the estate falls into the hands of a criminal, the land, the distillery, the name, all of it, reverts to the Commonwealth of Virginia. He stared at them. The sale to Global Spirits, Eleanor? Impossible with that document in play. Your gambling debts, Julian, your theft? That is the very definition of moral bankruptcy. And your pathetic, sordid little affair, Miles. A disgrace to the name. He knew. He knew everything. My killer, Arthur continued, stole that document, thinking it would free them, thinking it would erase the clause and allow the sale or hide the crimes. But I have the only other certified copy. He held up a small digital key to the camera, and it is in Mr. Davies's possession, along with my final will. So here is my last move in our little game. My final will is simple. My murderer, the one in this room, must confess, publicly, to the police. If and only if a confession is given, the rest of you, the innocent ones, will be free to split the inheritance as planned. He paused, letting the hope settle in before crushing it. But if no one confesses, if you all decide to protect the guilty, to keep this destructive secret, then in 72 hours Mr. Davies is instructed by that same will to enact the moral bankruptcy clause himself. He will hand my certified copy over to the Attorney General of Virginia. The Harrison Empire will be dissolved. The land will be seized. The name will be erased. And the entire fortune, all of it, will be donated to charity. He let that sink in. Specifically, Arthur Harrison said, his eyes gleaming with a final posthumous victory, it will go to the American Foundation for Sobriety and Ethical Living, a cause I'm sure you'll appreciate, Julian. The video ended. The screen went black. For 5 full seconds, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Julian broke the silence. It was not a word. It was a low, animal sound of pure, trapped rage. He shot up from the chair, his eyes bloodshot and wild, locking on Eleanor. You! He roared, pointing a shaking finger. You did this! Eleanor stood her ground. Keep your voice down, you pathetic... No! The sale! The moral bankruptcy clause. You needed that charter gone. You couldn't control him, so you poisoned him. You couldn't stand that he was going to sell your company. My company? Eleanor's voice was like a razor. I was trying to save this family, you reckless fool. You with your bookies and your stolen money. You are the walking, breathing definition of moral bankruptcy. You killed him to stop him from exposing you at the Legacy Cup. You couldn't stand the humiliation, could you? You killed him and now you've destroyed us all. I didn't kill him, Julian shrieked, his face crimson. I hated him, but I wouldn't kill him. Not like this, not with poison. Oh, of course not, Eleanor sneered. You'd just shove him, wouldn't you? Like you did in the stables? You're all impulse, Julian. You're a child in a man's body. You did it, and you were too stupid to even realize what you'd done. Stop it. The voice was quiet, but it sliced through their screaming. Eleanor and Julian both froze, turning toward the bookshelf. Miles, the invisible man. He was stepping out of the shadows, his face pale, his hands shaking, but his eyes were burning with a hatred that eclipsed both of theirs. Stop it, he repeated. Don't you see? This is the game. This is what he wanted. He's dead, and he's still making us dance. He's laughing at us from hell. He looked at Julian. You didn't do it. You don't have the brains to plan a poisoning. He then turned to Eleanor, and his voice softened, filled with that desperate, tragic loyalty. And it wasn't you, Eleanor. You wouldn't be this sloppy. You would have had a contingency for the copy. Julian, his panic turning to suspicion, stared at Miles. A slow, dawning horror crossed his face. You little ghost, Julian whispered. You're the historian. You're the one who knew about the poisons. You're the one who knew about that stupid charter. My God, you did it for her. Miles' face went white. The room, which had been filled with noise, was suddenly, terrifyingly, quiet. The three-way standoff was complete. The accusation hung in the air, deadly and real. Julian's accusation, you did it for her, hung in the air, a drop of poison that contaminated everything. Miles, who had been so bold, shrank back, his face a mask of wounded outrage. But he said nothing. Eleanor just stared at him, her expression unreadable. That is, enough, Mr. Davies finally stammered, his voice trembling but firm. He snapped the briefcase shut, the click of the latches sealing their fate. You three do not seem to comprehend the gravity of your situation, he said, his professional demeanor returning like a shield. Mr. Harrison's will is ironclad. It was filed with the State Bar and a copy of that video was placed in a secure vault. This is not a request. It is a legally binding contract. The clock has started. He looked at the Grand Art Father clock in the hall, its heavy tick-tock suddenly sounding like a hammer. You have 72 hours. From now, if a confession is not made to the police, the Harrison Empire ceases to exist. I suggest you all retain separate counsel. The police, who had been politely waiting outside the perimeter of the estate, were now, by necessity, involved. Arthur's video testament transformed their routine investigation of a prominent citizen's death into a full-blown homicide case. The man in charge was not the local sheriff, whom Arthur Harrison used to play golf with. It was State Detective Frank Harding. Harding was a man from Richmond with a cheap suit, tired eyes, and a complete, almost hostile immunity to the grandeur of Harrison Ridge. He saw the marble floors and the priceless art not as a home, but as a very large, very complicated crime scene. His first act was to formally declare the house a crime scene. The three heirs were not arrested, but they were not free to go. They were contained. Harding began his interrogations in the one room Arthur Harrison rarely used. The formal parlor, a cold, unused space with furniture still covered in protective plastic. He started with the most obvious motive. He started with the money. Julian was first. He was a wreck alternating between false, charming bravado and barely concealed panic. This is insane, Detective, Julian said, attempting a smile that looked more like a grimace. My father, he was a dramatic man. This video is it's his last twisted joke. Harding didn't smile back. He slid a single piece of paper across the cold, plastic-covered table. It was a wire transfer receipt from a holding company in the Cayman Islands to a logistics firm in Miami. $2.3 million, Mr. Harrison, Harding said, his voice a flat monotone. Sent from an account you controlled just 2 days ago. That's a lot of logistics. We spoke to the Miami PD. They know this firm. They are not in logistics. They are in the business of breaking legs. Julian's color drained. The charm evaporated. They're loan sharks, son. And our analysts say you owed them closer to $4 million. You were desperate. You stole from your father. He found out. He was going to expose you at the Legacy Cup. Harding leaned forward. That is a very, very strong motive for murder. You couldn't let him talk. I wouldn't kill him, Julian stammered. But you threatened to, Harding said. We have the stable hands statement. I will bury you. Those were your words. You had the motive. You had the opportunity. And you had the violent temper. Julian, cornered, did what he always did. He deflected. Me? Look at Eleanor. She's the one who was about to lose everything. The company was her life. She was moving $50 million. 50. Are you looking into that? Or are you just harassing me? Harding's face remained impassive. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Please wait in the library. Eleanor was next. She walked into the cold parlor and sat down, her back perfectly straight. She looked like a CEO at a hostile negotiation, not a murder suspect. Harding slid a different set of papers toward her. $50 million, Miss Harrison. Liquidated and moved offshore in the 72 hours before your father's death. That looks like a payoff, or an escape fund. Eleanor did not blink. It was a corporate maneuver, detective. You are out of your depth. Enlighten me. My father, she said, her voice dripping with ice, was about to destroy a century-old business in an act of petty spite. That $50 million was the seed money for a leveraged buyout. I was preparing to fight him in court, to save the company from him. It was a strategic defensive move, not a criminal one. A $50 million defense, Harding mused. Or was it the price for a subcontractor? Someone to solve your problem cleanly? With poison? Do not insult my intelligence, detective, Eleanor said. If I had planned this, I would not have been sloppy, and I certainly would not have used a method that left him alive long enough to film a ridiculous theatrical goodbye video. She had a point, but her coldness, her utter lack of emotion was chilling. Finally, Miles was brought in. He seemed small, insignificant. Harding looked at his file. No income save the stipend from his uncle. No debts, no assets. What did you have to gain, Mr. Miles? Harding asked, almost sympathetically. Nothing, Miles said, his voice barely a whisper. I lost the only home I've ever known. But you had an entanglement with Miss Isabella, your cousin's fiancée. Your uncle found out. He was going to throw you out, erase you. That sounds like a motive to me. A crime of passion, despair. Miles just looked at his hands. My uncle, he was a difficult man, but I did not kill him. Harding let him go. He was, for the moment, a non-entity. The detective's primary suspects were clear. The son with the crushing debt, and the daughter with the $50 million secret. But as the first day of the 72-hour clock ticked by, the police's financial forensics team, digging deep into Arthur Harrison's own accounts, found something that didn't fit. It was an anomaly, a hidden debt, but it wasn't Julian's or Eleanor's. It was Arthur's. In the final week of his life, Arthur Harrison, the man about to sell his empire for billions, the man who scrutinized every penny, had been quietly, almost frantically, liquidating his own personal, non-corporate assets. Old bonds, stocks held for decades. He had been gathering cash. Why? Why would a man on the verge of the biggest payday of his life need to scrape together a few $1 million in untraceable funds? It didn't make sense. It complicated the motive for everyone. If Arthur was also in some kind of hidden trouble, what was it? The investigation had focused on the heir's desperation. But now, it seemed the patriarch himself was just as desperate. The 72-hour clock was now a monstrous living thing. 36 hours were gone. The investigation, Detective Harding felt, was drowning in motive. He sat in the cold, plastic-covered parlor, staring at his makeshift evidence board. He had 3 perfect suspects, each with a rock-solid, compelling, and entirely different reason to want Arthur Harrison dead. Eleanor, the ice heiress, had the cold ambition and the $50 million to make a problem disappear. Julian, the prodigal son, had the violent temper and the crushing, immediate threat of total ruin. Miles, the invisible man, had the motive of a desperate, cornered animal, combined with the unique knowledge and access of a ghost. The problem was they all canceled each other out. Worse, the new discovery of Arthur's own hidden financial desperation muddied the waters completely. Was he being blackmailed? Was there a 4th, unknown party involved? Harding pushed his chair back, the legs scraping loudly on the hardwood floor. I'm looking at this all wrong, he said to the empty room. I've got too many whys. I need a how. He left the parlor and began to walk. He had to get inside Arthur Harrison's head. He had to understand the victim, not just the suspects. He needed to understand the house. He found Mrs. Gable in the massive kitchen, polishing silver that was already gleaming. She seemed to be the only person left in the estate who was still performing her duties. "Mrs. Gable," Harding began, his voice softer than it had been with the heirs. "I'm not asking as a detective. I'm just trying to understand him. Tell me about Mr. Harrison, his habits." The housekeeper paused, her hand still. "Habits, detective?" She looked up, her eyes clear. "He was meticulous, a man of absolute ironclad routine. The same breakfast at the same time, the same walk at the same time, and..." She hesitated. "And what?" "He was a fanatic about order, about cleanliness. He called it visual integrity. He said dust. Dust was a sign of a lazy mind. He would inspect. He would run a white glove over the mantelpiece in the study. If he found a speck, he would dock the pay of the entire cleaning staff for the week." Harding felt a small click in his mind. A fanatic. So, he hated messes. He despised them, detective. He despised anything old or forgotten or useless. The click in Harding's mind became a loud thud. He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened the evidence file, playing the video of Arthur's testament. He didn't listen to the words. He watched the background. He saw the old peeling wallpaper. He saw the rickety wooden chair. He saw the thick, visible layer of dust on the table Arthur was sitting at. "Mrs. Gable," Harding said, showing her the phone. "Where is this room?" She squinted at the small screen. "Oh, dear, that's the old wing. The historian's office." "The historian's office? You mean Miles's office?" "Yes, sir," she said, looking confused. "It's where he keeps all the old books and photographs. But that's very strange, detective." "What's strange?" "Mr. Arthur never went up there, ever. He hated that wing. He said it smelled of mildew and dead things. He hadn't set foot in that room in the 20 years I've worked here. He despised it." Harding was frozen. He despised it. Why? Why would a man who was a fanatical clean freak, a man who loathed that specific room, choose that exact spot to film the most important video of his life, while he was, by his own account, dying of poison? It didn't make any sense, unless he didn't choose it. Harding ran up the 2 flights of stairs to the 3rd-floor wing, a part of the house the police had only glanced at. He found the room. It was exactly as it was in the video. Cold, damp, the air thick with the smell of old paper and dust. Harding walked over to the simple wooden table where Arthur had sat, and he saw it, the clue, the object, out of place. The table was covered in a thick blanket of gray dust, but on the right-hand side there was a single perfect clean ring, a circle of polished wood where the dust had been wiped away. It was the bottom of a glass. Harding's mind raced. Arthur's glass of water by his bed was untouched. The coroner had found traces of a complex, slow-acting poison, likely a digitalis derivative in his system. The poison wasn't given in the bedroom. It was given here. Harding stared at the clean circle. The entire narrative of the crime shifted. The killer didn't just poison Arthur in his bed and then run to his study to steal the charter. The video, the poison, and the motive were all in this room. Harding rebuilt the crime, second by second. The killer lured Arthur to this room. Or perhaps Arthur was already here. Why? The video. The historian's office. Harding spun around, looking at the rotting shelves. Books, ledgers, photographs. "The original Harrison Ridge charter," he whispered. What if Arthur, paranoid about Eleanor's ambition and Julian's desperation, had moved the charter? What if he had taken it from the obvious study safe and hidden it in the one place he knew no one would ever look? The one place he despised. The room full of dead things. The killer knew. They knew the charter was here. They came to this room to steal it. And they found Arthur Harrison, perhaps holding the very document they sought. A confrontation happened. A struggle. The killer, panicking, forced the poison down Arthur's throat. But Arthur, the ultimate fighter, didn't die. Not right away. The killer fled, taking the charter, believing Arthur was finished. But he wasn't. Arthur Harrison, dying, alone in the dusty room he hated, locked the door. He grabbed Miles's old tablet, the one he used for research, and with his last defiant breaths, he recorded his final, terrible testament. He filmed his own murder. Harding stood in the silent, dusty room. The focus of the crime had changed. It wasn't the study. It wasn't the bedroom. It was this room. The investigation was no longer about who had the best motive. It was about who knew the charter had been moved to the one room in the house that belonged, heart and soul, to the invisible man. Detective Harding stood in the center of the dusty third-floor office, the single clean ring on the table staring up at him like a blind eye. He had the how, poison, delivered in a glass. He had the where, this room. And he had a powerful theory for who and why. Miles, the invisible man, stealing the original charter to save the woman he loved. Eleanor. It was clean. It was logical. He summoned Miles back to the room. The young man entered, his thin frame trembling, his eyes darting to the table and then to Harding. "Let's stop playing games, son," Harding said, his voice quiet but heavy. "I know he was in here. I know he was poisoned in this room. This is your office. You're the historian. You were the only one who would know your uncle moved that charter here, hiding it among all this old junk." Miles shook his head, his face pale. No, I didn't know." "You knew?" Harding pressed, his voice rising. "You knew, and you saw your chance. Eleanor was about to lose everything. You could be her savior. You could give her the one thing she needed to fight the sale. You came here to take it. And your uncle, he caught you, didn't he?" "No," Miles finally yelled, his voice cracking. "It wasn't me, I wasn't here." "Then who, Miles? Who else knew about this room? Who else knew about the charter?" I don't know." Miles was lying, and Harding knew it. "What else, Miles?" Harding demanded, his eyes scanning the room, the shelves, the dusty ledgers. "What else is here? What else did he hide?" Miles looked away, his eyes falling on a loose floorboard in the far corner, just for a fraction of a second. Harding saw it. He walked over, knelt down, and pulled at the board. It came up easily. Beneath it was a small hollow space, and in that space was a small, ornate, velvet-lined box. It was empty. Harding held it up. It was old, beautiful, and far too small to hold a large, rolled-up land charter. It was a box for letters, for jewelry, for a single, devastating secret. "This," Harding said, "is what the killer was really after, isn't it? The charter was just a distraction." Miles finally broke. He sank into the rickety chair where Arthur had died, and the story poured out of him. "He was here," Miles whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "My uncle. He was meeting someone. He kept all the real family history here. Not the fake polished nonsense for the distillery tours. The real history. The bad blood." As the narrator, this is the moment the truth unravels. The secret that was more destructive than any land charter. The investigation, the accusations, the financial motives, they were all part of Arthur's final malicious game. The true motive was not about money. It was about identity. The killer was Julian. His motive was not the $4 million gambling debt. That was just the appetizer. The true motive, the one Arthur Harrison had saved for the perfect moment of maximum cruelty, was hidden in that small velvet box. Here is what truly happened. Arthur, having already decided to publicly execute his son at the Legacy Cup, decided to twist the knife. He summoned Julian not to the study but to the historian's office, the room of dead things. Julian arrived, expecting another lecture about his debts. "You're right, Julian," Arthur had sneered, sitting at that dusty table. "I am going to destroy you, but I feel it's only fair you know why you are so fundamentally disappointing." He had opened that small velvet box. Inside were not jewels. They were a handful of letters, and a single faded medical document, a birth certificate. "You see," Arthur said, his voice devoid of all emotion, "your mother, she had a weakness for charm, much like you. Unfortunately for us all, she had that weakness before we were married." He pushed the document across the table. "You are not my son, Julian." The words hit Julian harder than any physical blow. His entire life, his name, his face, the charm he had inherited, it was all a lie. He was the son of a stable hand his mother had an affair with, a man who had vanished decades ago. "I am not a Harrison," Julian whispered, his mind reeling. "No," Arthur said. "You are not. You are nothing. You have no name. You have no bloodline. You have no inheritance. The debts, they are all yours. You are, as of this moment, a trespasser in my house." This was the final erasure. Julian, already pushed to the brink by his debts, by the threats from Miami, by the impending public humiliation, now faced with the loss of his very identity, he snapped. He looked at his father, the man who was not his father, and he felt a lifetime of suffocating, controlled hatred explode. And then he saw it. On Miles's desk, among the historian's research, was a small glass bottle with a Latin label. It was the digitalis derivative, the poison Miles had been researching purely for historical curiosity about a 19th century Harrison family dispute. A perfect, terrible coincidence. Julian lunged. It wasn't a plan. It was pure animalistic rage. He grabbed the bottle, grabbed the glass of water Arthur had brought up and slammed it down, dumping the poison in. "You want to erase me?" Julian screamed, his voice hostat. "I'll erase you." He forced the glass into Arthur's hand. He shoved it at his face. "Drink it." Arthur, shocked by the sudden violence, fought back, but the poison spilled into his mouth, onto his shirt. Julian, in his blind rage, grabbed the small velvet box, the proof of his illegitimacy, and fled the room, locking the door behind him. He didn't care about the charter, he didn't even see it. He just needed the proof of his shame to be gone. And Arthur Harrison, left alone, dying in the dusty room he despised, realized what had happened. The poison was slow. He had time. With his last agonizing breaths, he did not call for help. He called for revenge. He grabbed the tablet. He started recording, and he lied. He knew Julian, in his panic, had stolen the box, but left the charter. So Arthur created the 72-hour time bomb. He deliberately misidentified the stolen document as the charter, knowing that lie would ignite the moral bankruptcy clause. He knew Julian would be too terrified to confess. He knew that silence would, in turn, destroy Eleanor, destroy Miles, and burn the entire Harrison empire to the ground. It was his final, perfect, sadistic checkmate. He couldn't just ruin his fake son. He had to ruin everyone. Harding, holding the empty velvet box, walked down to the library where Julian was chain-smoking. "We found the room, Julian," Harding said. "The historian's office." Julian froze. "We found the empty box. We know it wasn't about the charter." Julian looked at the detective. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was the hollowed-out shell of a man. He didn't say a word. He just slowly and deliberately put his hands out to be cuffed. The destructive secret was finally out. The click of the handcuffs fastening around Julian's wrists was the loudest sound Harrison Ridge had heard in a century. It was the sound of an empire, a dynasty, and a bloodline ending. Julian did not resist. He seemed relieved. The weight of the performance, the lifetime of pretending to be the charming prodigal son when he was just a terrified, hollow man, was finally over. He was, as his father had threatened, erased. Detective Harding led him out of the library. Julian did not look at his sister. He did not look at his cousin. He just looked straight ahead, walking past the portraits of the ancestors he had, in one single, rage-fueled moment, betrayed. When the heavy oak door of the mansion closed, sealing Julian's fate, the three people left in the library, Eleanor, Miles, and Mr. Davies, remained frozen. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked. Mr. Davies, his face pale and etched with a profound, decades-old sadness, walked over to the clock. He reached behind it and, with a heavy sigh, stopped the pendulum. The silence that fell was absolute. "The confession," Davies said, his voice a dry rasp, "was made with 48 minutes to spare." He looked at Eleanor, who was still standing, her posture rigid, her face an unreadable mask of ice. "The moral bankruptcy clause, it is nullified. The will proceeds as written. The state will not seize the property." Eleanor closed her eyes just for a second. It was not a look of relief. It was a look of completion. The battle was over. She had won. Mr. Davies continued, Julian's actions automatically disinherit him. His share is forfeited." He paused, then looked at Miles and Eleanor. "According to the terms of the will, with Julian's share voided, the Harrison Empire, the distillery, the land, the stocks, the name, all of it, is to be divided equally. 50% to you, Eleanor, and 50% to you, Miles." The Invisible Man had just inherited half of $1 billion empire. Eleanor's eyes snapped open, her gaze locking on Miles. This was the one variable she had not anticipated. Miles, who had been sitting in Arthur's chair, the chair of the man who had called him a parasite, looked up. He looked at Eleanor, the woman he had silently, obsessively worshipped. He saw her face. He saw her ambition. He saw her cold, calculating eyes already planning how to buy him out, how to control him, just as Arthur had. He saw, in that instant, that the curse was not broken. It was just being transferred. Miles stood up. He was no longer shaking. "No," he said, his voice clear and firm. Eleanor's eyebrows raised. "No." "What?" "No, thank you, Mr. Davies," Miles said. He walked over to the desk, picked up the small, empty velvet box, the one that had held Julian's terrible secret, and slipped it into his pocket. "I don't want it," he said. "I want no part of this family. I want no part of this money. I am not a Harrison. I am free." He looked at Eleanor. "It's all yours, cousin. You've won. You are the new Arthur." He walked out of the library, past the grandfather clock and out the front door. He did not look back. Miles, the ghost, the historian, the invisible man, simply walked down the long, foggy driveway of Harrison Ridge, carrying nothing but a single empty box, and for the first time in his life, his own name. The trial of Julian Harrison was the sensation of the decade in Virginia. The media called it the Bourbon Patricide. It was a spectacle of old money, dark secrets, and Shakespearean tragedy. Julian's defense tried to argue temporary insanity, citing a lifetime of psychological abuse at Arthur's hands. But the prosecution had the video, they had the poison, and they had Julian's confession. The verdict was quick, guilty, first-degree murder. The judge, seeing no remorse, only the broken shell of a man, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was, in the end, erased. 6 months later, the Harrison Ridge distillery was more profitable than ever. Eleanor, as the sole owner and CEO, had executed her global strategy flawlessly. The sale to Global Spirits was a distant memory. She had saved the empire. She sat in the master study, her father's study. But it was different now. The heavy, dark leather had been replaced with steel and glass. The room was pristine, bright, and sterile. It was perfectly efficient. She was at the desk, signing a stack of contracts, her signature sharp and confident. Mrs. Gable entered quietly. "Your dinner is ready, Miss Harrison," the housekeeper said. "Just leave it by the door," Eleanor said, not looking up from her work. "And make sure the third-floor wing is locked. I want it emptied and fumigated. It smells of mildew." "Yes, Miss Harrison." Mrs. Gable left the tray and closed the door, leaving Eleanor alone in the massive, silent house. She had the power. She had the control. She had the legacy. She was 41 years old, and she was completely and utterly alone. The destructive secret, in the end, was not the one hidden in the velvet box. That was just the catalyst. The true poison was the legacy itself. Arthur Harrison, a man obsessed with control, had spent a lifetime brewing a toxic hatred in his own family. He poisoned his children with ambition, rivalry, and fear, long before Julian ever picked up that bottle. In his final act, Arthur played one last brilliant sadistic game. He thought he would win, even in death, by burning his entire empire to the ground. But he miscalculated. He failed to see that the son he never loved, and the nephew he never saw, would be the ones to break the cycle, one by choosing freedom, and the other by choosing to confess. The empire survived, but the family was destroyed forever. Find out what secrets are lurking in the next family, and who will be the one to finally expose the destructive secret.